Hey, it's Oregon Airsoft Arena. We're bringing you the Echo 1 Gap battery mod, removing the front handguard and moving it into the upper receiver. Stay tuned to see how we do it. Boom. We're going to be looking at the Echo 1 GAT. We're going to remove the battery compartment as the grip and move the battery into the upper receiver. At the end of the video, your GAT will look like this. Your battery will be held in the upper receiver. The rail will now be available to add flashlights, lasers, and whatever you'd like. Today we'll be converting our battery to 2mm bullet connectors instead of Tamiya connectors because the Tamiya plug is too thick to fit in the upper receiver of the GAT. Let's get into that now. We're going to start by cutting our Tamiya connector off. I like to start by cutting one wire at a time. Now we're going to solder the red wire to a female bullet connector 2mm. We're going to strip the wire. I like to use flux on my soldering. Check, make sure that you have a good solder. Again, you don't have to add heat shrink until the end of the process, but try to clean up your solder if you have a little bit of mess. Now we will do the negative wire. Now that we have soldered the bullet connector onto the positive wire, we are going to cut the negative wire, and then we are going to solder on our male bullet connector to the black wire. Now we're going to strip the negative wire, and we are going to do the same process as we did for the positive. Add a little bit of flux because I like to have a little flux to help pull my solder onto my connectors. And then we are going to solder the black wire onto the male bullet connector. Give it a good tug, make sure it's good. And now we apply heat shrink to our bullet connectors. Alright, now we're going to apply our heat shrink to our female positive connector. And on this connector, you're going to want to leave just a little bit of overhang on there, and then we will heat shrink it. Now we're going to put the heat shrink on the negative wire. This should be the finished product of the battery when you are done with the bullet connectors. Notice, as you can see, the positive, I went a little farther with the heat shrink so that way if they tried to touch, nothing will happen. You will have to do this process on your charger as well. As you can see, it is the opposite on our charger from what our battery is. So red would go to the male and the female red on the battery, and the negative gets the female and the male on the battery. Alright, now we're going to get started on modding the gun. First thing we do is remove the battery compartment, which is the front grip. Next, we are going to be taking the front sight and removing it with a Phillips head screwdriver. Undo the screw. Remove this front sight and use something to pry on the front of the gun for the outer barrel, and you're just going to move it up to the second hole, and we are going to flip the front sight around and drop the screw back in. Now we will remove the rear sight and set it out of the way. We will need it soon. Remove the upper receiver from the lower receiver of the gun. Simply do by pulling the upper away from the lower and feeding in the wires from the lower receiver. Set the upper receiver to the side, flip the lower receiver over, and you'll notice there are a red and black wire here. These are the ones you are going to use for your battery connector. You will cut however long you would like on this wire to determine for battery size. Just size up your battery to the compartment so that you know where the battery will go as it is in the gun. The reason why we moved the front outer barrel up a little ways was to allow for a 7.4 LiPo to fit. We cut our wires pretty close to our gearbox. Just remember, when you put the bullet connectors on the gun, you do the opposite of what is on the connectors for the batteries. Make sure that on the positive wire, you will just be heat shrinking the back side of the male bullet connector, and on the negative wire, you'll be heat shrinking the entire female connector a little bit over, so that way when you plug the gun in, you will not have a problem. You can also run an alarm if you cut the wires to the right size, so that way you can save your LiPo battery. After we have put our 2mm bullet connectors onto the gun side of our modification, make sure that again that they are opposite of what the battery is. So they should be the same as the charger, but opposite of the battery. Your female should have a little excess over, so that way when it goes on, makes it full, so it's fully covered on both the positive and the negative of the battery. You can then position the battery on the inner barrel, and we will slide the battery up as we slide the upper receiver onto the gas. As you get closer to getting the upper receiver on, you will need to slide back the charging handle to get access to the hop-up, and you will help the wires stay in position, because if you don't, it will push the upper receiver up a little ways and will not line up. So as I come to my top and put it together, you will notice that everything will line up perfectly. Then I will reinstall my rear sight. And now we have a functioning Echo 1 GAT with battery mod. And we still have access to our hop-up unit as long as you force the wires out of the way so you can adjust your hop-up. But as you can see, the battery is in the upper receiver, and no longer do we need a grip to hold our battery.